Welcome, everyone. This is The Ends Justify the Memes, the show where the lowest of the low, that is the most wretched of wretched and the most deplorable to end all deplorables, two heterosexual, Christian, white males from the American South talk about culture, philosophy, history, health, and what it means to be a man in the 21st century. I'll be your host, Bill. This is my co host and producer, Tank. So crack open a beer and lend us your ear because the ends always justify the mean.
Woo!
What's going on, Tank?
Oh, just getting back into the scotch over here.
Getting back into it. Looks like I'm definitely grainy.
Yeah.
Can do nothing about that as long as the voice is good.
Yeah, I'm getting good audio.
All right. Well, I'm sure it'll either clear up or we'll just have me jumping around all night. So let's start with the meme cast news.
Okay, let me go ahead and pull it up and memecast go. All right, we're pulled up.
All right, we got the first meme here.
Yep.
This is COVID memes, guys. If you hadn't heard, breaking news: coronavirus kills two in meth lab explosion. I like this at the bottom. Day 81, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau remains in self-isolation for safety of all Canadians. He's so noble.
You know,
Such a noble man.
I've been in a few meth lab explosions myself.
I bet you have. I know about your parts.
Yeah, you can tell this isn't really a meth lab explosion because the trailer behind it also isn't incinerated.
All right, let's go to the next headline here. It says, wear a mask to survive the virus. Brought to you by the same government that said duck and cover under a desk to survive a nuclear explosion. Interestingly enough, I watched Tucker Carlson last night. I don't watch Tucker very often, but now and again I'll turn him on. And he had Adam Carolla on, and Adam Carolla made the exact same joke. Like, what are we doing? Getting underneath a desk? Come on, it's a nuclear explosion, people.
Did they really? I've seen this before, but I never knew. Was this true? Did they actually have a nationwide get underneath the desk?
I don't know if it was nationwide, but I'm pretty sure certain school districts did in certain areas. I would suspect in major cities that could potentially have been hit.
Right. Yeah.
So let's go to what do you got? What do you say?
Go ahead. No, we're fine.
I was just saying, let's go to the next one here. Now, I can't verify any of this, but it is a meme. And so just like all fake news, it could be true or it could be false. So it's not their fault. 45 out of 50 US governors did not force COVID-19 infected patients into nursing homes, but 5 of them did. Cuomo, Tom Wolf, Phil Murphy, Gavin Newsom, and Gretchen Whitmer. Nearly 40% of all COVID deaths in the United States. That's not an accident.
You got to wonder, do you really think that anyone would be so stupid, actually? And here's the other thing. So I actually saw some people talking about this with Cuomo putting the old people in the nursing home, and they were like, well, where were they supposed to go? I'm like, didn't Trump park a big ass ship off the coast of New York to stick sick people into? And then he said he didn't need it. I don't know.
Dude, I had somebody, he's a pretty smart guy, nothing against him or anything, but I had somebody say something to me about what happened to all the testing stations. And I'm like, we didn't need them.
Yeah.
Everything was locked down. No one was going out. We're still sort of kind of locked down. We're still under these stupid mask mandates that really do jack all. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. The reality is that these people are completely incompetent and power hungry, especially Whitmer and Newsom. And I mean, completely crushed. As far as PA goes with Tom Wolf, about a month in, something like that, there's in central PA around Pittsburgh, the head of their major hospital system like over 8 hospitals. This doctor said, "We understand what's going on. It's not as dangerous or as deadly as we thought." Blah 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 blah. But see, the CDC and the WHO didn't say that,
Right.
so we have to keep being idiots
Mm,
and continue on this destructive path. So let's go to the next one,
okay.
because good lord, I love Captain America. Says, "Don't worry, kids." Or sorry, "Don't worry about kids peeing in the pool. They have bathing suits on." And he's like, "How does that even work?" "Like a mask." And no, this is funny because I was talking to my sister over Christmas, not to disparage her or anything. And I remember telling her that I really like well, I have a lot of critiques of modern cinema, especially going woke, but I really like Captain America because it had this whole liberty, like big government intrusion thing in it. And she's like, "Well, I don't know about all that. I didn't get any of that from that movie." And, I don't know about all the, like, that sounds like conspiracy theory to me. And I'm like, I didn't tell her, but I was pretty sure. I just didn't feel like arguing. But for sure, the writers of that movie, the directors, were like talking about that
Oh
specifically,
yeah.
about the surveillance state. They're like,
Yeah.
"That's why we wrote this script the way we did."
Mm.
So, but I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Well, I am a conspiracy theorist. That doesn't really bother me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, like
So, in comedy news, we have at the dawn of time. "Are you going hunting with me?" "Not today. I'm going to think instead." We see man thinking several hours later. "Did you reach any conclusions?" "In order to survive, we must hunt and pick berries. So, we're being oppressed by nature. Nature makes you work."
mm.
This is like some neckbeard that shall not be named. We'll just call him Voldemort. And and his constant ridiculous commie nonsense that never makes any sense because he just wants to be pseudo intellectual and always right. Again, I will not name him, but you know, his name starts with the same letter as Voldemort.
I just realized this huntress is topless.
Yeah, well, it's a cartoon, so hopefully we don't get banned. I did show Ghost on the Shell on All Minus One once. Hey, that's plug number one. All Minus One
Hey,
people, that's my
you got in
my
early
channel.
too.
Is it early?
Yeah,
It's not that early.
I mean, 13 minutes in, you got it pretty early.
Well, we started like 3 minutes late, so
Okay.
So next meme is SpongeBob, which I really really hate SpongeBob, but SpongeBob memes are great. Um, in any case, how commies always just think everything's about labor
Yeah.
and it's always about inequality of wealth, and now they've turned it into inequality of whatever nonsense. Well, SpongeBob, he could totally defeats that, at least as far as the economics goes.
Right.
So Patrick says labor is the sole source of value. SpongeBob says land, time, risk, ideas, interactions between factors of production, trade.
But uh, that's why Baudrillard doesn't get a lot of credit. That the stream that we did about consumerism, where we went over the new theories of value and how consumption is the main driving force. He used to be a Marxist, and then he was like, actually, I think there's more to it than just this, labor theory of value stuff.
You were talking about he was one of the he's the fourth positional person.
No, he's the one that when we did our he's actually kind of a postmodernist. But when we were talking about the different,
Okay, yeah.
we're talking about like sign value and symbolic value and stuff. Yeah, he used to be a Marxist, and he was like, consumption is really the driving force of value, not labor. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, the anti-Keynesians. And so lastly, we have is this King John Biden? Is this what do we want to call him? It's not Winnie the Pooh.
No, that looks like old Biden.
Mhm.
Mm.
All right. In some fake news, like the real fake news, not us. Riot coverage last 2 months. This is fine. After polling data says it's not fine. It's Trump's fault.
There have
If
been.
it was Trump, if it was Trump's fault, wouldn't you think that they would have covered it this entire
Oh
time?
yeah. Well, before they were saying there was no riots anyway, so not
Well,
only are there
mostly,
now riots, but they're Trump's fault.
mostly peaceful, like a psychopath. They're mostly peaceful.
Yeah.
You know, they don't kill everyone they
Yeah.
interact with.
9/11 was mostly peaceful that day.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. I was in the Marine Corps then, and it was mostly peaceful. It was crazy and hectic, but mostly peaceful where I was at.
Ooh.
So here, this is actual fake news from The Hill. This is a tweet. Just in, Trump supporters gather without mask in North Carolina despite request from local GOP officials. Now, if you zoom in on this, there is like a few individuals without masks here or there,
Mm-hmm.
but the majority of them are wearing masks. The media is a gaslighting propaganda machine, my friends. That's all we can say.
What is
Fake
it?
news is just the latest meme.
What is it? Michael Malice says. The corporate press is the enemy of the American people, and that is a moderate position.
It is a moderate position. It is absolutely a moderate position. Um, eh, well, let's say this: it's a moderate to the right position, right?
Right.
So it's anything that's not left wing, anything that's right of Mao is moderate or right wing or alt right or far right, because somehow they get to do all the framing. Um, but yeah, whatever. Let's move on to news with Biden. Corn pop, fat, dog face, pony soldier, you ain't black. And Don Lemon. Wow, one of the most eloquent, beautiful speeches I've ever heard spoken. It brings tears to my eyes.
That dude's
Don
insufferable.
Lemon.
Oh. Don Lemon. Oh my God, yes.
You know, he was voted, I think in 2014, the worst journalist.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, are these guys even really like even Tucker Carlson? Like, I don't really even consider any of these guys a journalist. These guys that, well, of course, there's not really any journalists left, but these guys, there's just,
Tucker-
well, you know,
Go ahead.
these guys that talk on TV. Like, I'm sure Tucker has journalists that work for him, but like he himself, I don't think these guys are paid to be on TV or journalists anyway.
Tucker started off as a journalist or a pundit or whatever, you know,
Right.
op-eds, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
But he does own his own media company.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it? The Daily Caller is his.
Right.
With
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
was it with Ajit Pai? Is that who it is? That
Yeah.
or am I? Yeah. So the Daily Caller is his.
I didn't know that.
Um,
Okay.
Probably one of the reasons why they brought him on to replace what's his name? O'Reilly. Who I wasn't really a fan. I like way back when I was young, I liked O'Reilly because O'Reilly
Yeah.
was like, get at those liberals, but O'Reilly is just a neocon
Yeah.
monger, and I really hate how he cut people off. And
Yeah.
I mean, like Tucker is much better, so much better. And it's why he has the highest rated cable news show ever in history. So this is old. This is quite old. This is a few years back. This is from 2017. But this meme I've seen going around a little bit in the gun world, and I just thought it was funny. So this guy was out of his mind, and he was this was the Waffle House shooting some years back, 2017. Some articles try to blame him as being a Trump supporter. This guy was just literally crazy. He thought his phone was bugged. He thought his computer was bugged. But the real funny thing is the fake news. This is a screenshot of NBC News. And this is 1,000 rounds of ammunition, 1 Remington rifle, and 2 scopes. Stockpile found. Like 1,000 rounds, dude. Like, what are you talking about?
That's an afternoon at the range.
Yes. Like if I go to the range, I don't shoot 250 rounds, and I don't go to the range very often.
Yeah.
But I'm not shooting at least 250 rounds. Like I'm like, what the hell's the point? You know, 1,000 rounds.
Try to buy 1,000 rounds of anything right now.
I saw some dude on Reddit pick up a bit here recently. So good for him. My big thing, I've been finding I've been looking around for more defensive or hunting loads for 300 blackout.
Yeah.
and I can find them. I found some now, but they're over $2 a pop, which is
Mm,
odd because before it was always the subsonic.
right.
It was that high. I mean, it's not odd because I understand there's a shortage, but I can get like plenty like 147, 155, and it's like, eh, it's good for planking. And like, if I had to use it, I'd use it in a pinch, but I'm not really trying to put down a deer or something with that,
Right. Ugh.
and people, yeah, well, people, man, like anything 125, 110
Mhm.
for a blackout. I've seen deer drop at like 400 yards.
Ooh.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Like instantly drop. And you don't see that a lot even with larger caliber rounds. There's a lot of energy with that round. That's why I
Yeah.
like it so much. And my thing is, if the world goes to crap, everyone's like, yeah, but there's not as many rounds as 5.56 is everywhere. I'm like, yeah, you think I'm not going to be able to find like a random, you know, AR 5.56 laying around,
That's true. Yeah.
or AK? Like it's going to be everywhere. So I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, let's go to old Kamala here. Good job, rapist. Alleged, allegedly.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
Allegedly. She literally did this, though. This is not fake news. This is how cringy and crazy the Democratic Party is.
Phew.
She said that this guy did a good job and he's heroic and everything else. Right after he fingered his ex-girlfriend and said some other, smelled it and said, I think another man's been here
Phew.
and whatever else. She called the police on him, didn't comply with the police, was hopped up on drugs. I mean, look, I mean, people are redeemable, but if this guy finds redemption, it's because he's been paralyzed. I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to be that harsh, but that's where it lies.
Mm. Yeah, and wasn't she one of the ones that had this conspiracy theory that Kavanaugh gang raped a bunch of girls when he was younger or something?
Yeah, like she didn't work her way up,
Yeah.
doing what she did. That old Willie Brown got some fringe benefits. So another thing is she just talked about she just became anti-vax because Trump's supporting it, which is interesting because the lefties have been talking about all the crazy right-wing and anti-vaxxers.
Hmm.
And I'm like, Robert Kennedy is the head anti-vaxxer. And has been a staunch Democrat for a long time. And he's not even an anti-vaxxer. He's a practical vaxxer. He doesn't like the modern vaccine schedule that has been implemented since the late 90s that seems to overload children. And if you do the research, probably doesn't have much effect on children until they're a little bit older, just
Right.
because your immune system, the
Hmm.
various parts of your immune system aren't very well developed until you get to be about 2 years old. And so giving babies vaccines immediately, probably not the best idea. And again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but for some reason, everything's got to be black and white in this freaking country. Everything's got to be politicized. I wonder if that has to do with the that steady, ever steady march to global communism.
Mm.
Couldn't be that. All right, let's do. Let's. I don't even remember this woman's name, but the triggered lady.
Yeah.
17 is too young for a kid to have a gun. He says 10 is perfectly fine to switch genders and strip for money. I also had a hormone one. By the way, this is supposed to be under Dem logic. I forgot the segue into that, but whatever. What do you think about that, Tank? Can the
Well,
17-year-old hold a gun?
well, yeah, I believe so. I'm actually a pretty big proponent of child soldiers. I think they make the best soldiers, really.
Um, gotta watch it there, because in Iraq and Afghanistan,
Well,
women, children first. Then people don't play by those rules. I mean, they do,
yeah.
but not the way we think about it. So,
Yeah, but definitely, I think a guy, a 17. If you're going to shoot kids up with puberty blockers at 10, then you can definitely let 17-year-olds carry guns around.
well, I don't think Desmond there is being shot up by puberty blockers, but he definitely is being manipulated by his mother.
Oh
And
yeah,
I feel really bad for him. He's going to grow up and just be a very screwed up person. I would not be surprised if he's not a criminal or dies of a drug overdose
yeah.
early on.
Doesn't this kid strip in like gay bars too?
Yeah, that's kind of what the meme's about. I had a few others about giving cows hormones being wrong, but giving kids
Yeah.
hormones is perfectly fine, stuff like that. But just to whittle it down, this is leftist
Yeah.
lib logic. It's and I say lib, not liberal as I am classically, but yeah, libtarded.
I just don't. So these kids are stripping, or these like little drag kids or whatever, are stripping in bars that normal kids wouldn't be allowed into because they serve alcohol, but they let these kids go there and strip. That's just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, dude, like the reality is, like I know gay people that are
Mm,
well-adjusted gay people, but there's a fringe element of gay people. That's what you see in Pride. It's
right.
all about being a hedonist, just completely debased individual going out and just being degenerate. And you're supposed to be proud of that. Well, no, there's nothing to be proud of in any of that. And so you see that, and then they take these little kids out because you have idiotic parents that take their kids out and they sexualize them when they're young, or expose them to sexualized things while naked people are walking through the street.
Right.
And we're supposed to go, oh, this is so great. There's a difference between oppressing gay people because I don't really care. Like keep your bedroom to yourself. Do your own thing. There's a difference between that and saying I have to accept you being, a degenerate in the streets. And the left takes sides with Muslims, but wait till
Right.
your Muslim overlords come and take power over you because you ain't having any of this stuff.
Mm.
Anyways, let's get to this last one here. Riddle me this. Here's the most perplexing riddle of them all. Those I've sown. Why do immigrants strengthen our community, but not their own? Sorry, I didn't rhyme that right, but whatever. I used to love the old Batman, the Riddler especially. But
I
yeah,
I once saw a adult film that was based on the old Batman, and it's completely ruined it for me. Like that's all I see now. Like when I see.
was that like a old 70s, 80s one or something?
No,
Or was that
it was like a modern, you know,
okay?
film, adult film, but it was like made to look like the old Batman.
How dare you ever watch an adult film, Tank? I thought you were some wholesome Christian man.
Well, that was before I heard about Dr. Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, okay. All right. So last news is entertainment. And, unfortunately, the actor's death who was playing Black Panther, Marvel decided to make a deal in entertainment. And they thought, who better than Talcum X to be the Black Panther?
Mm. God, they
I
cannot
hate
make
this.
him look black. He tries so hard.
Dude, I had this whole skit, like this whole entire skit. Uh, I talked to some of my friends um, who were immigrants or of other, minority statuses, whatever that is. But my one buddy is Mexican, and my an old roommate of my wife's who's a black girl who was dating a white dude and all this stuff, and this idea that there would be the White Panther. And I kind of came up with this because there's actually a group in the 70s called the White Panthers, and they were allies of the Black Panthers. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny to have the White Panther like reemerge over the years, be dressed in the Black Panther getup, and then come out and like be interrupting people having normal relationships between the various ethnicities or races or however you want to frame it, and just be totally racist toward them because he's an idiot, as all the SJWs do. And so like you would see like a black guy, or sorry, a white a black girl and like a white guy like kissing on a park bench, and the Black Panther would jump out and be like, get your hands off her, you white devil. And then the girl be like, what are you doing? This is my boyfriend. No, he's accosting you, black lady. I am protecting you. That kind of stuff. I just thought that'd be a pretty funny skit.
I want
I
like
don't
a
know.
I want like a Rachel Dolezal trans Black Panther.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, I want like one of these chicks that are like has been faking being black forever. Well, I guess Sean King has too, but I want specifically the trans Black Panther.
We know Matt and Blonde of Beauty and the Beta had a good point the other week with Rachel Dolezal, and that she kind of had fetishized it the way her
Oh
family was
yeah,
growing up. It was really crazy. I didn't know all that because I never watched her Netflix special. I just saw a crazy person, and I think Talcum X just found a way that he could essentially take advantage of people and get that oppression points,
right.
and maybe he felt, he felt better with the it's like the whole yo boy thing, I grew up plenty of white boys that, related more with black people and black culture. And hey, that's cool. You want to do that, but just don't pretend like you're black.
Right.
you know? I mean, Eminem doesn't go around pretending like he's black.
True. True.
So, anyways, folks, that's the end of the Meancast news. Can you play that again there, Tank?
I can. And that has been your Memecast news segment.
All right, guys. So let's have some real chat here. Guys, if you are interested, we do have an entropy you can check out. I'm going to link that real quick in the chat, even though we don't have any chat tonight, but hey. Well, no, we got Yiz.
Yeah,
We
yes,
got
was
Yiz in
there.
the chat.
Yeah.
Well, hey Yiz, thanks for watching. Anyways, tonight we're going to talk about some of this election conspiracy stuff, the mail, and all the stuff coming out from the Democrats, the strategic war games, but specifically we want to focus on the commies. And Tank happens to be an expert on communist revolution, Chinese communist revolution, that is.
Well, I don't know about expert, but it is a hobby of mine to look into.
You have a you wrote a thesis for the higher education on this, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, believe it or not, Tank is highly educated, much more higher than I.
I can make all kinds of meth.
So why don't we go into the what's going on with the mail conspiracy and the Democratic war games and the transitions and all this stuff and Trump and right-wing violence and everything else after you cover some basis with the insurrection of Mao.
The insurrection of Mao.
Yes.
I mean, I guess just to give like a quick like encapsulation of the communist Chinese Revolution was the dynastic period of China lasted until 1911, which is when the Republic of China took over. And then, of course, they got occupied by Japan around the same time, and this is around World War II. World War II ends, and the nationalists and the communists form a joint coalition to push out the Japanese, basically. And so it's sort of agreed upon by a lot of historians that the nationalists did most of the work, and because they were weakened from fighting the Japanese, that the communists were able to take over. And they took over in 1949. That's considered the first year of China. So China as a country, as we think of it today, is like 60-something years old, whatever the math is there. So you have this 5,000-year-old civilization that's been boiled down to 60 years. You can make of that whatever you want to. And then, of course, right out of the gate, we had the Great Leap Forward, which was pretty disastrous.
They killed how many millions of people?
Like all these things, it's guesstimated. The low figures put it around 20 million. The high numbers put around 60, I believe. But that is what it is. And then that kind of came to pass. There's a couple purges that happened. There was the 100 Flowers movement, which was basically Mao said, "Hey, we're trying to run this country. Everyone speak up your ideas and criticisms." And those who criticized got sent off to the camps. And then
Imagine that.
and then you, and then you had the Sino-Soviet split, which kind of really made Mao pretty paranoid. And from there is where the Cultural Revolution begins. And of course, the Cultural Revolution starts about 1965. It lasts until about 1975. Mao dies there afterwards. Some other random dude takes over for a little bit, and then Deng Xiaoping takes over in the 80s and kind of opens China up, creates a special economic zones, and then that's kind of where, well, of course, then Xi Jinping comes on a little later, and that's kind of where China is today. So that's modern China's history in a nutshell.
Well, that's a pretty good quick synopsis. You had mentioned you hadn't watched the video I did the other week on the Little Red Book. That's on All Minus One. Plug number 2, All Minus One. People over on YouTube, check me out. Excuse me. Usually do about 3 videos a week, sometimes more. They're usually run somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour long. So it's a little bit longer. It's a lot of content. Watch them in segments. Like, I'm not going to change because the YouTube algorithm says you guys like 10, 20-minute videos. Screw that. You need content. You need to educate yourselves. Anyways, the really interesting thing I brought up to you right before we started streaming was, I say all the time, and I'm much more educated with the Bolsheviks in Russia, but I say it all the time that those people that are within the movement originally will be excised.
Yeah.
And so during the Cultural Revolution, the very person who decided that, oh, we should have a little red book of all the Maoist sayings, the person that invented that, the person that wrote that, was then excised by the party. And then they used the book against him to say that he was an immoral dog. And to me, it's just absolutely, absolutely insane. So what happened with the Cultural Revolution up until, let's say, Nixon opened up trade?
So you kind of look at Cultural Revolution between 2 kind of eras. The first part was what you think of when you think of the Cultural Revolution. It was students going out, struggle sessions, carrying around Mao's little red book, fucking shit up. Mao said, go forth and tear down the old and rebuild the new. Anti-Confucianism, all these things that you think of as the Cultural Revolution. And then after about 1970, 71 is really when the more political part of it started happening. It was more inter-party things, some more purges. There had been purges, but some more purges. And this kind of when it started to shift focus. And Mao eventually said, this shit's kind of getting out of hand. And, he actually had to bring in the military to make it die down. And then, so you have this more like a bunch of politicians basically accusing each other of not being communist enough is ultimately the last half of the, and then Mao's wife got involved into it. And there was this Gang of Four, and the weird thing that happened was the Cultural Revolution was obviously Mao's doing. He was like, hey, kids, young people specifically, go out and fuck shit up. And then later, when it started to kind of get out of hand, the party didn't want to blame Mao for it because he was kind of this cultural icon. So they blamed his wife and the Gang of Four, and they ended up, having trials of these guys, saying like, "Oh, it was your fault, and you're the reason why the excesses happened." And they started calling them ultra leftists. So they had a rightist purge, anti-rightist movement like a decade before, a little more, and then now people were being purged for being too leftist in a communist country. So it's a really strange thing that happened. It's absolute madness for 10 years.
Well, at some point you have to come back to some sort of center line. And I would say from a philosophical perspective, right, this is Hegelianism,
right,
where you have that false dialectic, that false dichotomy that says, well, the right and the left have to have this battle, and then we have to come somewhere in the center.
Right.
And so if Mao thought you were going too far left, then you say, oh, we need to go back right. I could see that in the end working out.
Yeah. You got to think too, like even if you take all the old school communists by modern communist standards, in a lot of cases, these guys are reactionary. Like, Stalin wasn't exactly a friend of Jews and gays. Um,
Right.
and then you've got, guys now that are like trans anarcho Stalinist furries or whatever. Like, no, you would have been against the wall, bro. Like, so if you really want
Well,
to,
they get taught all this nonsense stuff. They're like, oh, and we talked about this right before the stream. Oh, well, the gulags weren't that bad.
yeah,
They weren't that horrible. It's like, do you understand that the few people in the media who are allowed to go over into the USSR that got to see the gulags, got to see these fake gulags, they weren't the real thing.
right.
And if you look at the writings of someone like Solzhenitsyn, it's far, far worse than you think. Um, do you understand that the people in the former Soviet bloc nations today are taught these things and they know how bad it was?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not asking those questions because you want to be fooled. You want to believe in your utopia, or you're disingenuous, which I think most of the people are, or you're stupid. And there's a lot of that too. You're the useful idiot, and that you're gonna be the one shot and hung. And that's the problem with totalitarianism. This is why actually I have an issue with any idea of monarchy or whatever. I always think that decentralization is best. And really, this really got embedded in me being in the Marine Corps, because there's a difference between centralized and decentralized command. And within the Marine Corps, within the military, especially the Marine Corps, at least in the days I was in, decentralized command was the thing. It was it. That's how you're the most effective. And the reason why is because you're building leadership throughout the ranks. Now, I'm not saying it always works out perfectly this way, but that has to do with the leaders above you. Um, there's always bureaucracy to fight. This is the flaw of being human. But you're building leadership. You know the job of two people above you. If someone gets killed who's above you, the mission still gets carried on
Right.
down to the last private. If there's only, and if that guy's like some boot, just boot is the slang, out of boot camp, or in the army they call them cherries. So if you're some cherry boot and you've been in the military for, let's say, 6 months, because you had to go through your basic schooling, boot camp, all that stuff, and you're on a mission and everyone dies, yeah, you're probably just going to try and survive. But the idealistic thing is that you're going to go off to accomplish the mission, and you know how. Now maybe that guy doesn't because he doesn't have experience, but that's the point of the leaders, to bring those people up.
Mm-hmm.
And all I'm saying is that decentralization helps with that. It gives no authority any power. So if we decentralize, for instance, our monetary system, as it once was, as it's supposed to be in the Constitution, we wouldn't have so much power in the government. Ron Paul wrote a whole book on this called "In the Fed," and he talks about how having a centralized monetary system actually that creates more corruption within the system itself. And so it's either power in the hands of the people, or power in the hands of the oligarchy, the tyrants, the monarch, whoever it is. And that's always my problem with centralization of power. While I can never espouse monarchy, um, and then you always get, we've talked about this before too, you always get that person trying to then assume that power. So there's always going to be someone who's conniving, underhanded. Rasputin did this, and Russia undermined the whole um, czar of Russia, which eventually led to the revolution. There's a lot more there. The Russian Revolution is so complicated because it was just a series of revolutions and famines and all kinds of crazy stuff for decades. But I guess to segue. Well, do you have anything to say about that, Tank, before I get into something else?
No, I mean, I feel like, even though I kind of do espouse this whole concept of monarchy, I get the criticisms. That's, I don't believe anyone should go into this sort of realm thinking that you're going to build utopia. And I think that anyone's got to say like whatever system whatever it is, whatever system you're talking about, it's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have trade-offs. So I mean, I totally
Right.
get it. You know what you're saying with that. My thing is monarchies are lindy, right? They've been around. They existed a long time, and again, they're not perfect, but for me, and I this is absolutely emotional. You know, this is feelings before facts, but I would just rather live in a society that maybe had a overreaching king every once in a while than drag kids stripping at gay bars. But that's just me, you know.
But what if the monarch approved?
Then we gotta kill him, bro. I mean, they still make
Yeah,
guillotines.
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, I did want to ask, what do what factors after the Cultural Revolution and Nixon's opening up of China, which I think I'm all about free trade, but I'm getting the older I get, I'm beginning to think that that was a big mistake.
Right,
Um, you know, not because I want the Chinese people to be hurt per se, but because no matter what is going on with the Chinese people, they're going to continue.
right.
But the Chinese government has just gained so much power. And so what happened between that period, right after the Cultural Revolution, or up until then, and then Nixon opened up relations, China started incorporating capitalist, I would say soft fascist type systems, if
Right.
you would, because it's still communist, it's still under
Hmm.
the central control until the incident at Tiananmen Square.
So the China didn't really open up what you think economically until under Deng Xiaoping after Mao had already died. And some people argue how much of a communist Deng Xiaoping really was. He's quoted once talking about communism or Marxism or whatever, as saying it doesn't matter if the cat's black or white as long as it catches mice. Um, so he was definitely less of an ideologue in terms of that. So he kind of built these things called special economic zones, and this is kind of where Hong Kong and stuff comes in. So we had like different areas of China that were more open than other areas. So some economies were completely still under control of China, and then some places were more open, especially like South China.
Let
But
me interrupt you there, Tank, because I think the stream
yeah,
froze.
I'm getting some frame droppage here. Oh, it's this. We're gonna reconnect in 7 seconds. So I think something just. So we're still recording, so we'll just keep it. We can keep
Okay.
talking. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If the stream's not good, you're recording and
Yeah,
YouTube uploads later. So
yeah.
cool, cool. All right. So what were we saying?
So yeah, that's basically how it worked out. Is Deng Xiaoping came in and said, "Look, we're not going to be able to be as communist as Mao was, basically." Even though I don't think he really said that out loud to like the masses very much, but that's kind of he realized that. So one theory I've heard is that he was actually pretty communist, but he realized you had to get rich first before you could be communist, which I guess it is a better strategy than most. So that's kind of was sort of where he's coming from.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's very true. We can look at the Scandinavian countries, which guys, they were never socialists. They had implemented some socialist policies. They still had markets. They still kept free markets. They didn't have centralized control of those markets. What they did was those they heavily taxed to subsidize people. That's not the same thing as socialism. Now, it creates a social welfare system, and that's not good either. And what they found out was, well, oh yeah, excuse me. What they found out was is that because of that, especially Sweden, that they were bankrupting themselves. So you have to start off rich to implement those things. And in the case of like a nation like Russia, they were not very rich. They were very poor. And so in order to have the price controls and to set proper wages or to understand what subjective values of goods were, They had to base it off capitalist systems. They had to look at the United States and Europe. They had to be like, well, what are they pricing this at? What's it actually worth? This whole subjective market value theory um, in economics is is kind of very important because things are only worth what they're worth within a time period. Now, there's some things like gold or even oil, more in the modern age, that are always going to have a great deal of worth because of their utility. Um, but let, let put it this way. Let me put it this way. In the early days of the Industrial Revolution, or maybe the slightly more advanced days, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, before everyone started getting all progressive and wanting to implement socialistic rule everywhere in the capitalist laissez-faire free market nations, when that first happened, the rise of the average person out of poverty and the growth of the middle class was so ridiculously huge that you could not even fathom it. And the reason why people they turn around today and they look back at it and they go, "Oh, well, all these people were poor and blah blah blah." And it's like you don't understand how they were living before that. Even here in the United States, people had dirt freaking floors. You lived in a little apartment, like if you lived in a city, like a little 1 or 2 bedroom apartment with like 10 kids and probably your grandparents too. Like eh, life got way better way quick. And a lot of a lot of the things that happen with that is that naturally wages had risen, but on top of that, um, the prices of a lot of things went down because of that industrialization. Meaning there were more markets, or sorry, there were more goods on the market, and they were cheaper to make because before that everyone had to be like a craftsman, a laborer, and so things were more meticulous. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a good in that because there is, and we still see that things that are handmade, handcrafted, people value. They still value more. You value that more than I think the shirts from Old Navy. Like this is, I think this is cheap, subjective, like value nothing cotton shirt. Probably paid less than $10 for this. Um, so as far as internationally, that might be a lot, but as far as in the United States, because our nation is so rich and our wages are actually really good despite the cost of living here. This is a really cheap shirt,
Mhm.
yet it's very nice, and it wasn't handcrafted. That whole thing. So you have to understand these deeper economic principles, and the thing that the communists can never figure out really was how to subjectively value anything. All they think about is labor. And they think, well, if you work and you work hard, it means it has value. And now they've switched that with the postmodernists that because you're a minority, you've been oppressed, and therefore you're more valuable. No, no, not at all. Anyways,
Well,
that's a
the
tangent.
thing about the labor theory of value is, um, so the Marxist rebuttal to a lot of talk about labor theory of value is that, well, we're not saying that if you just go out and make mud pies that the labor makes the mud pies valuable. They talk about socially necessary labor. So you basically have to be putting forth labor to make something that somebody else wants. Okay, that makes sense to a certain extent. But doesn't that mean that it's really the consumption that's making the labor have value? Like, you know, something being socially necessary is up to a consumer. It's not up to whoever the laborer is. So I don't know. It's just not a. I mean,
That's why it's subjective.
yeah. Well,
That's
I
why
mean,
it's subjective.
a lot of
Yeah.
people have criticized labor theory of value. Eh, I really don't know why they still stick to it, but it's just kind of part of their thing.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing though. You had guys like the French philosopher Albert Camus, and then later were also the guys from the Frankfurt School, and then later on picked up in French modernism this idea that, oh, well, yeah, that doesn't work. So we're just going to turn this into power dynamics. and oppressor and oppressed. And let's be completely antithetical to anything that is scientific or reason. And honestly, the only reason why I could think anyone would want to adopt that is to be at the top of the hierarchy and have power. Um, but we kind of got off in the weeds there because I wanted you to talk about, if you understand or if you're studied up on this. It's something actually really important to me, but the massacre at Tiananmen Square and how that occurred.
Okay. Oh, I gotta dust off my stuff here. So there was the general. I'm not real read up on that part, honestly. I know that there was basically Mao was like, all right, this shit has to cease. Or actually, no, it was after Mao. It was during Deng Xiaoping.
88.
Yeah, so it was,
87.
yes,
One of
yeah, it was 88. So it was under Deng Xiaoping, and it was basically like pro democracy. It was like, hey, these kids were like, we want to get some democracy and stuff, and Deng Xiaoping and the Communist Party is like, you can fuck yourself. It's not going to happen. So there's some protests in Tiananmen Square, and most of the actual killings didn't happen in Tiananmen Square. It happened throughout Beijing, and it basically the protesters and the military got into a fight, and the protesters did win a couple of little like battles they had, or not battles, but conflicts they had. They killed some soldiers, and the soldiers retaliated very heavily and kind of put it down. And now China doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, something like anyone under the age of 30, like 90% of them don't know about it. By the way, as far as I can see, the stream is completely stopped. We can keep recording
Yeah,
if you don't want to mess with it.
I don't know what the problem is. I'm getting all kinds of. I've never got dropped frames before. Now we're getting dropped frames, so I don't know what's going on.
It's all that tinkering you're doing all the time. But we'll keep recording, and I mean, dude, if you have the time, like just tonight before you go to bed, like just upload it to YouTube.
Yeah, I can do that.
We can go in later and tag it and do whatever we got to do for other stuff. But
Right.
yeah. So no, I always found, because I think the idea Tiananmen Square was for me, I've always been curious and a little bit in the political sphere, and for me, it was one of the first things I was kind of aware of politically, other than Reagan
Yeah.
and like the fight with the Soviets. Um, it's funny too to see how a lot of the stuff is framed today. Like read something or looked at something the other day about talking about how, oh, well, the Republicans and their evil rule, and they brought us to the brink of nuclear war. And it's like, no, no, no. Reagan did not bring us to the brink of nuclear war. That was the media fear mongering you and people talking about stupid stuff because they don't know any better. Were we on the brink of nuclear war? Yeah. Yeah. You know what that was called? The Bay of Pigs. Um, that was in Cuba. And don't get me wrong, I like JFK considerably, for a Democrat at least, compared to other Democratic presidents. I'm not a huge fan, but I like JFK. And like he brought us near nuclear war. Reagan did nothing of the sorts and defeated communism because of it. But this is rewriting history, the way they frame it. Oh, he almost did this. Oh, he upped the stock markets. Oh, the capitalist. Oh, they were out of control. Yes, people were hurting, but look, guys, without business, you don't have a job. Without big business, what do you think is going on now? You know, people are blaming Trump for the Democratic lockdowns over COVID, where these governors are being idiots. And even my governor here in West Virginia, Jim Justice, is being an idiot. I can't stand the dude. Like, I don't even think we have 200 deaths in the state. Only a couple thousand infected, and and well, it might be like 10,000, something like that. I haven't looked into numbers in over a week. So, but yeah, I get those people died. Yeah, that's sad. Most of them, though, like how many of those were excess deaths? The idea of excess deaths in medicine is people who wouldn't have died otherwise within a year, because the majority of these people that have died probably would have died otherwise within a year, or at least half of them. And then you have to take that other half and you look at this, what the CDC had to say with, well, only 6% of the total, which I guess if you divide it by half would be about 12% now of that other half. They probably wouldn't have died necessarily within a year, but if they hadn't been obese, had heart disease, had liver disease, whatever else that they were facing, wouldn't have died from this thing. And we're also not looking at the flu. Did you have the flu?
Right.
Did you have emphysema? Did you have pneumonia? Did you have any of those other things? So this is a tactic that the left always does. They always point the finger. They always go the other way. And then what really happens is they're sitting there saying the conservatives are killing people, and then you go through you go through the Great Leap Forward, where like 100 million people die, and the Cultural Revolution, where tens of thousands or millions of people die, and incidences like Tiananmen Square and whatever else, where this left-wing communist utopia, we're not allowed to talk about those deaths caused by the government, because those were justified. I mean, the government's justified because they have the right ideology.
I mean, yeah. Look, that's one reason why I'm glad Tankies exists, because it really it's the mass drop for pretty much all communism. And honestly, there are a couple. There's a certain small subset of communists that I understand. Like, there's this lady on Twitter. She actually has a podcast called What's Left, and they talk about left-wing stuff. But her name's Amy Therese, and she's from like Australia or New Zealand or something, I forget. But she's a communist, and pretty much every other communist hates her, because all she cares about is helping the working class. She's like, the working class struggle, we need to help them. All this stuff about furries and trannies and all this other mess is not important. And she's basically purged from leftist communities. She's been banned off Twitter several times. They call her crypto-fascist and all kinds of stuff because she says what communists in the 20s were saying. So it's really strange. That's kind of like, I don't really see communism as an ideology anymore, or even leftism or progressivism, I guess. It's more of just a religion that's kind of getting tested these days. Because really, communism's not coming back. It's not going to happen.
Well, when I do say commies, I mean,
yeah.
It's a little tongue in cheek when I say it. Every time I say it, I mean, I say it more as a generalized label, and because of the horrors it's caused. But I know that it's some sort of it's actually more like fascism that I feel like is coming, and not from it's look.
Oh yeah.
The Republicans, the neocons is one thing, but as far as Republican voters go, they're not fascistic. They're just not. I've met very few that are. All the fascists that I've ever met in my life are on the left. There are Democrats as far as American politics go. I remember having a conversation with a guy that back when I worked in the jail, who talked about how he didn't like, he thought all the rules should be the same across different states. Like, he didn't understand why in one state you could wear a helmet when you or you had to wear a helmet when you rode a motorcycle. In another state you didn't. And I think it got brought up because we were talking about West Virginia was passing open carry at the time, and I was working in Maryland, and or not open carry, sorry, constitutional carry, because we did have open carry for a long time. And people were like, "Oh, it's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be a hell house." I'm like, "Are you an idiot? Are you a moron?" Like, no, it's not. I'm like, these criminals. You work with criminals every freaking day. Most of them are in here because they're felons
Mhm.
who were caught with guns committing another crime later on, not even with the gun, but when they were arrested, when they were searched, they were found with a gun, you know? And it's like, I'm not exactly, I kind of feel like felons should probably be able to own a gun, but I also understand how the Constitution works. And it says that you can be stripped of your rights if you're convicted. So, um, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, what imaginary world do you live in? You deal with horrible, jackasses every day. They're trying to manipulate you and screw with you. And then you're like, well, if they allow concealed carry, regular normal people are going to go out and just be crazy. And it's like, no,
Mhm.
criminals don't care about laws. Normal people do. When normal people have the constitutional right to exercise the to when they have the right to exercise their constitutional rights, when they're allowed to do that by the local laws, then they're going to be careful with it. And what do we see now within that with like Kyle Rittenhouse? Oh, self-defense. Oh, he's such a horrible person, self-defense. Yet rioters and looters, murderers and rapists, pedophile are like, oh, those poor people. I'm sorry, man. No sympathy. Like on a one-on-one basis, I can be sympathetic with you, but those were awful people that were not seeking redemption. And and this idea again, like I said, that people on the left every time, they're the ones who want the national laws. They're the ones who want to put everything on everybody. Somehow Trump's the fascist wanting to invoke a fascist state over the nation, yet he's been very, very slow to invoke the Insurrection Act, to deputize uh, state troopers and or state police, as they're probably called in Oregon, and whatever else, and a lot of that's under William Barr, anyways. So I just I don't know, man. It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, well, what I'm seeing, I guess you could call it maybe fascism is a good term for it. But it's a very loaded term, so people aren't very receptive to it. But what I see is a lot of leftist progressives, oftentimes self-appointed or self-called socialist communists, that are teaming up with, multinational corporations to try to cancel guys, working class guys with opinions like ours, or just anyone who doesn't have opinions like theirs. There's this really cool Twitter account called Woke Capital, and it's all these like Rainbow, Nike, LGBTQ, like all these huge multi-billion-dollar corporate, Amazon, all the big guys, and how they're pandering to these social justice causes. And what you'll see is a lot of these guys, a lot of communists or progressives are supposed to care about the working class, are completely on board with burning down, the local shop or whatever, even if it means someone's livelihood or getting someone fired, empowering the capitalist boss to fire someone for having the wrong opinion, when their entire, ideology is wrapped up in supposedly elevating the working class. I get the idea that the working class maybe gets a raw end of the deal a lot of times. That I think most people can understand that, but you got the people that supposedly supposed to care about the working class the most and want to liberate the working class, and they're teaming up with Jeff Bezos to fire the little guy for having a racist opinion, and it just doesn't make any sense. And that's why I say communism isn't your problem. Communism's not coming back, because the communists, the people who are supposed to be fighting for a communist future, don't give a shit about it either. All they care about is empowering, themselves to enforce this religion.
Well, yes, but also, like I say, I'm fond of saying, a duck is a duck, and it doesn't have to be perfect communism. It doesn't have to be perfect socialism. It doesn't have to be perfect fascism. But as far as I'm concerned, those are all ducks. I don't care if you're a mallard or some I don't even know any other kind of duck off the top of my head, but it's some kind of other duck. You're a freaking duck. You know, a
Oh
swan's
yeah,
a duck.
yeah.
Like
There,
a goose is a type of duck. And not specifically, but they're a waterfowl. And yes,
yeah.
we can look at the taxonomy
Mm.
of all that and be like, oh, well, there's a little bit different. They look, well, they're birds that like
Yeah.
to swim in water. They have webbed feet. They float around and they fly off.
Well,
And
that's well, kind of. Yeah, I see what you're saying, and you're right. The what I'm saying is that uh, there certainly is a movement that wants to see small time America. You know, your average guy. They'd prefer he just didn't exist anymore. You know, that's
well,
definitely yeah.
let me say this before you go into that. I don't think communists ever cared about the working class.
That may be true.
Yeah, I don't think they ever did. Preaching to people about the working class, like Orwell found this out. Peterson got into this a lot. Jordan Peterson, that is. But if you look at Orwell, he talks about Orwell. Peterson does. What he found, especially the road to Wigan Pier or whatever, or if you read books like the what is it? Crap, I can't think of the name of it, but it's basically a classic book. It's another book on the Fabian Socialist Society within England. They don't care. Those people didn't care about the lower classes. They feigned that,
Hmm.
but what they cared about was that you had more money than them, that you had more privilege than them. What they care about is that somebody's really wealthy. I don't care how much wealth you have. I really don't. What my concern is always, anytime I talk about wealthy corporations or wealthy people, is their influence.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Cardi B, who's an idiot, and basically, for lack of a better word, she's just a whore. And I'm sorry, people, Cardi B's a whore. She's admittedly a whore. She's admitted that she has drugged and raped men and stole their money and whatever else. Cardi B is a whore. And I hope that she does better in life and gets herself together and finds God, does the whole Kanye thing. But she is not a developed human being. And she's talking about all this stuff. I watched this thing with the Hodge twins the other week where I guess they made fun of her and then she came back at them on Twitter. And so they made a whole nother video. They were a little bit more polite. And she was like, I know about politics because I pay more taxes than you.
The fuck?
Yeah, exactly. You're an idiot. Paying taxes has nothing to know or nothing to do with knowing about politics, right? You pay taxes because the government makes you. Period.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean you know jack about politics.
I pay taxes and I don't know anything about politics.
Well, there you go. There you go. And she's saying because I pay more money, I know more about politics. No, you're dumb. And then Candace Owens just recently owned her, and you can think about, you can think whatever of Candace Owens. I've had varying opinions of her over the years, but I think she's an important person in the media's eye for various reasons. And the reality is that there are a lot of people who are rich who have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, I see this with Joe Rogan a lot. I don't like Joe Rogan, because he's an everyday Joe, literally.
Yeah.
He kind of is. And he talks about, oh, we know Democrat, they should do this, they should, or left. And I see him more conservative. At the same time, I'm like, Joe, you're a multimillionaire. You just signed a big fat deal with Spotify.
Yeah.
Instead of embracing the government doing this stuff, why don't you start your own charity? Why don't you help these people out yourself? I always give credit to Brad Pitt back during Hurricane Katrina because the government was so enveloped in red tape after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and Louisiana in general that nothing could get done. And Brad Pitt went down there and built more houses for people than the government itself was capable of doing. But that goes back to me understanding economics, that kind of like staunch classical liberal perspective,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's nothing but bureaucracy, government waste, corruption, all that stuff. It's existed throughout time. Go read the Greeks, man. Like go back to Egypt. Go 3,000 years ago. It's always existed. The Israelites in the Bible had political corruption. The Babylonians, it's always existed. And that's why I can't get behind the centralization of power. But like I said, a lot of it is run by jealousy. And I think communists have always been run by jealousy and this false promise. I don't think that they're sincere people. Voldemort, he man, that guy's a douchebag. But he did this whole stream with Destiny about the right to self-defense and blah blah blah, and just went so off into the weeds.
Yeah.
And I watched Adam Friended and Stitch do like an 8-hour stream about it. I watched a shorter stream with Sargon breaking it down. I have a comic that I saw doing it about zombies looking for brains. And he's like, "Oh, guys, like you're supposed to take me. Just go ahead and take me." And they move on. They're like, brains, because he doesn't have any. Like, he's just a grifter. He's just a guy who's like, "Oh, look at me, I'm cool." I mean, like, this is what these people are out in the streets. Most of them are criminals. There's a lot of history of this. Like, there's social unrest, people taking advantage of this, going off and doing crazy things, and it brings out criminal elements. And man, they really got to be thankful that they really should be, that most people on the right fear God or something, or they don't want to go out and actually hurt people. As mad or as angry as they get, because I really think this stuff would have been, if people would, and this is my bigger fear actually, is that they'll keep pushing and the government will do nothing, especially if Biden and Harris get in, and they'll do nothing. And what it will be in the end is it will be vigilante squads in the streets, and that's the government takeover will happen. Because those useful idiots who are Antifa and BLM, riding and doing whatever right now, people will put up with for a while. But there'll be certain factions who are more motivated, and there'll be larger racial tensions created because of this, to potentially go out into the streets and extract revenge. And we haven't seen that yet. Despite what the mainstream media says, we have not seen that yet.
Well,
We've only seen cases of self-defense.
Well, that's this whole thing with Kyle Rittenhouse, right? It's his sin isn't that he defended himself, because anyone who watches what happened with him with that whole shooting, and doesn't at least think, well, anyone who looks at that and calls him a murderer, says he outright murdered some people, they're not mad because they're not mad because he murdered people. They're mad because he won, because he's supposed to lay down and take it. I mean, it's basically what this guy we're talking about said, that if the mob comes for you, you better just give up, and which is no one's going to do that. You can't tell me that if that was a mob of white supremacist Nazis chasing down some lowly communist who had an AR-15, that anyone on that side of the aisle would say, "Oh, well, they should have just gave up their gun to the mob." Fuck no. They've been saying punch Nazis for forever now. It's
what I was saying. We can go all the way back to Occupy Wall Street, man. That was like early 2000s.
The problem
is the Obama administration
is that a lot of people's been laying down to these mobs, and he didn't. And he not only did he win, but he won in a really cool way. Like, he looked cool. This kid, this kid looked good. I mean, optics are important.
I don't know if he looked cool. My thing is with him, my whole thing is that he exercised so much restraint.
Yeah, that's
he didn't
what I'm
have
saying.
to run.
Yeah,
like literally, if you want to make the douchebag argument, instead of running when people said get him, all he had to do was turn around and put a cap in them too.
Yeah.
And I get it. People talk about how well he trained. Well, I don't think he was that well trained, but he knows his way around a gun. At least you don't have to be well
Yeah.
trained to understand how firearms work well. People who say that don't have enough training with firearms. I can tell you that. Um, because I could easily, as rusty as I am, drill with 4 guys for a few weeks and be able to do guys that were previously trained, don't get me wrong, and easily be able to do some crazy, crazy stuff that would stun people. Something like, well, another meme I must put up was the Vegas riot shooting, right?
Yeah.
Um, or not the Vegas riot, the Vegas mass shooting, because that had to be done by numerous people because there were so many reports and camera footage of numerous people shooting at the same time, not just from that hotel room.
Hmm.
Um, but the official story basically went away, and it was just the one guy who was found dead. I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was some sort of sleeper cell terrorist attack. I don't know if they got involved with that guy and used him. I have no idea what was going on there. I have no idea if he was in leagues with other people and he decided that he wanted to go out that way. I have no idea, no clue what happened there. And it's really a shame that there's been no further investigations into Las Vegas and that whole massacre. But what I can say is that some very few highly trained people could do a lot. If you sent a SEAL team in, a Delta Force team, probably a Ranger team, a squad or platoon of Marines, and you said use lethal force, these things would not be going on now.
Oh,
And
for sure.
I'm not condoning any of that. In fact, I don't like the idea of the government using that kind of force. But what I'm saying is that these people, these kids are being able to LARP in the streets. If right now you look at what the little bit of rioting that has gone in LA very recently over this past weekend, the LA police, they do not screw around, dude. They will come out, they will break you up quickly. And it was funny to me. I saw something on Instagram today, this morning, and commented on it. I'm like, why is it always this like very disgruntled woman yelling at the police and taunting them, or some like twink with this really effeminate like voice going, oh yeah, screw you, you can't do anything to us. And then
Right.
next thing you know, the police are like, yeah, we don't care. Beanbag time, gas time, all that stuff. And I don't want to see the boot on anyone's neck, and I don't want to see, I'm all against police brutality. I don't want to see any of that stuff. But man, when you're blocking off like people's right to travel, you want to riot or loot, you want to hold people hostage like they did in the Chaz, basically. Realize what you're dealing with, people. Realize what you're dealing with.
Well, that's what I'm saying with the way the optics were with this Rittenhouse thing is that people got so used to seeing. It's like when your champ gets knocked out. People got so used to people laying down in front of this. There's this kid with his baby face and his weird glasses, and grown men chase him down. He caps one of them. 2 other grown men chase him down. He beans one right in the heart and he dies instantly. One of the guy gets his bicep blown off as he's drawing a gun. Like you're saying, he knows his way around a firearm, but he's not super trained, but it still looked good. And I think it was a blow to that side's ego that, oh shit, like we're not as tough as we thought we were. And I think that's really his biggest sin. I think that's why he's hated so much, is because they just despise that this little, guy who's supposed to know his place didn't know his place.
Well, that's what I always say, man. I hate to bring it up. Like, I feel like I bring it up inadvertently, kind of like Tim Pool's like I'm mixed race, or
Yeah.
I'm from the South Side of Chicago, or Ben Shapiro, which I almost never watch anymore. But Ben Shapiro's like my wife's a doctor, that kind of
Yeah.
meme. But I'm a little dude. I'm not a big dude by any means. but I know how to handle myself. And I always think about this because it's like I know, like people don't expect certain things out of me, and they expect me to lay down. They're like, "You're
Right.
little. You have no right to like stand up to me." And I'm really non-confrontational, but I don't like being backed in a corner.
Right.
So if you like back me in a corner, I'm like, "Okay, dude. Well, like I'm trying to restrain myself, but you're asking for it right now." And that's kind of what you're right. That's kind of what they're doing. They're backing people into a corner and they're asking for it. And most of them aren't tough or know what they're really asking for. And I'm actually afraid of that though too, because I know how weaponized the media is as far as controlling the masses. And that's where the government, at least the neocons and the neolibs, especially the neolibs, will come in and hammer and be like, look, think of all the non-right wing violence that has happened over the years, non-right wing. And I don't know where Trump supporters have done I mean, there have been a few incidences maybe. But I don't know where there's been a lot of Trump supporter violence or anything like that. Like other than you could say Proud Boys, but most of what I see from Proud Boys has been defensive. So when you see that, you go, well, how does the media always frame this? White supremacist, right wing. Well, I'm sorry, guys. White supremacist is left wing. It's a left wing ideology. It's not right wing. Never was. I mean, you could say it was right wing as far as way back in the day when slavery was cool. You know, those people were conservative then. But as far as liberty values, this has nothing to do with parties switching, it just has to do with morals, political morals changing. As political values went on, the left that is still the current left, the Democrats, were the party of slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow, all that stuff, anti-segregation, whatever else. And what do they run on all the time still? Race, 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 race. You know, and then the conservatives who, you know, if we want to talk about parties specifically, the Republicans, I covered this actually a little bit in a video I did the other day. All minus one, three. The crowd goes wrong. Anyways, all minus one on YouTube, folks. You know, go check it out. Go check it out. Right. The right has always kind of been fissured and split. The only thing that the Republicans were ever united on really was the abolition of slavery. And ever since then, they've always been fractured. The Democrats, they don't care. They're just the collective. Let's do the collective thing. But with that, man, let's D Live is being crazy. Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And get back to it. Let's cover some of this election stuff.
Okay.
And didn't mean to hit that. Let's cover some of this election conspiracy stuff. Let's talk about a few things, and I don't know.
Okay.
You need a break?
Yeah, I could stand one.
All right. Let's take two.
All right.
Take two.
And we're back.
Yeah, I'm here, man.
Yeah. All right. So election.
Well, let's start with this. Let's talk about, so first off, the post office has been in decline forever because it cannot compete with private services, basic economics. It costs money. I understand why the post office was implemented originally. We should probably still have a postal service um, that is privately run. It can still be the USPS, but this whole election postal service conspiracy is nonsense. This whole idea that voter fraud isn't a thing is nonsense. The fact that we have Democratic strategists playing tabletop RPGs like they're doing D&D about the election and what they need to do afterwards and talking about secession. Dude, secede, please, West Coast, just secede. Like, yeah, you can go California. I mean, Oregon and Washington, they're beautiful, but I'll go to your countries some other time. I'm fine with that. Please go. Um, what else is there? There's talk about the military being involved. There's what are any of these people running on? What are they running on other than Orange Man is bad?
Yeah, I'm really worried, honestly, that that thing that came out that said, it'll look like Trump won in a landslide, but then the mail-in votes will come in and it'll show Biden victory. That's not putting confidence in anyone about the integrity of our elections.
That's the red mirage.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx both said, well, if you can go to a store with a mask and socially distance, you can vote in elections.
Yeah, you can go riot, you can go burn trash cans. Why can't you go vote?
And then now they're saying right-wing violence is going to break out at the elections. Right-wing violence. When? Show me when. On video. I don't want to hear some bogus reporting because Twitter is too freaking good with independent reporters on the street. Show me when in video that I can see with my own eyes that has happened.
Yeah,
I
mean the most obvious example of, okay, so when someone says right wing violence, the first thing I think of is Charlottesville, which one person died at, and then they shut it down. We've had lots of people die in these riots, and they're still going on. But the other thing is Timothy McVeigh. Okay, Timothy McVeigh, because he blew up, a federal building. Okay, well, the people rioting and that side of the aisle have already said that violence in retaliation for police brutality is acceptable. And Timothy McVeigh blew up the federal building because of Ruby Ridge, which was as egregious as anything that's happened recently. Perhaps even
Waco, dude.
Yeah.
Say whatever you want about David Koresh.
Oh yeah, but
I don't care if he was a cult leader and a pedophile, or
yeah,
I don't know if I call him a pedophile because I think the girls that he was with that were younger were at least pubescent. But still, he's gross, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was weird for sure. But
yeah.
But even if you take David Koresh out of it because he's such a polarizing figure, and you just do Ruby Ridge, I mean, they shot women and a baby. Like that was serious shit. And so Timothy McVeigh, being the OG police brutality protester, some might say, said, fuck you guys, and I'm going to blow up his building. Okay, it is what it is, but that precedent's being reaffirmed now. So what are you really complaining about?
Well, interestingly, I watched Academic Agent stream with Charlemagne and Don from Plebeian Media the other day, and Don kept talking about, but you guys keep retreating and cede land and cede ground, and honestly, that's the only place we can be at unless we're going to go out and be violent.
Yeah.
And for me, as my religious views go, I don't want to go out and be violent. I'm telling people I think that you should be prepared. But just be prepared to defend yourself and your family. But even then, in such a case, we have numerous examples now where you're just going to be demonized.
Hmm.
And I know so many people are starting to wake up, see the scams in the mainstream media, but so many other people aren't. And I don't know what they need to do until someone's in their face beating them, until Antifa beats them for no reason,
Hmm.
until BLM comes to their house and firebombs it or whatever they have to do. I don't know what else to do to wake these people up. And they're so pacified. I don't mean pacified like I choose to be pacified because I don't want to. I don't want to have that responsibility that I hurt somebody, and I don't want to have to answer to God for that. But don't put me in a position where I have to answer to God for that because I might. That's all I'm saying. And
Well, I mean,
it just it well, I think it's just this elitist. I'm protected. Oh, our society. So like they don't. I don't know. I've been to third world countries. I've been in
yeah,
war zones. So
yeah,
whatever. I understand how fragile societies are. But
right.
anyways, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
But my thing is with all of this, I'm not a super big brain guy or anything, and I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't care about political systems. I don't care about economic systems. I don't care about any of that stuff. I want to live in a society where a sizable chunk of the population, doesn't want to see me dead. I don't care. I don't. I'm fine if everyone thinks, if I die, no one cares. I'm cool with that. Yeah, I'm not that important. But I would prefer that a whole group of the population not at least prefer that I die, of all these things. And that's where we're at now. There's so many people like these guys on the news and the stuff that's going on. It's hard to feel like I'm welcome in this country. Now, in my own community, sure, like my neighbors, we all get along, we all have a good time. The town that I live in, it's all great, but it's rough to think that I can go to some places in this country and uh, people would prefer me just kill over dead. Like, like you're saying, I've been to third world countries. I went to China and I was loved. It was a great time. And my fellow countrymen don't share that same sort of, and I really don't hate anybody, I'm actually,
Yeah.
I'm actually pretty fascinated by a lot of different cultures. And, the concept of multiculturalism really doesn't even bother me.
Yeah, I'm not less bothered with it as long as it's I don't have anything with keeping your own culture,
Right.
but there has to be some sort of unifying factor within a society. Otherwise, you will always create balkanization.
Right.
And so let's look at the Roman Empire. I always like going way back. But the Roman Empire was a multicultural society, very much
Oh
so.
yeah. Yeah.
And race really wasn't an issue. And for them, race was seen different. It was ethnicity. It had to do with your nationality. It was more tribal basic.
Yeah.
And we don't have that. We don't have that because it was okay to be proud that you were from whatever, you were Germanic or you whatever, as long as you were a Roman citizen, it was okay to be proud that you were of a certain culture or whatever. Now, there was a lot of slavery then. We can get into that. A lot of slaves too, though, were, eventually over time freed.
Hmm.
So kind of a different concept than we have now about slavery, and also about the worst part of American chattel slavery, where at some point it was just generational slavery,
Right.
which happened in ancient history as well. But normally there was a time period where slaves would be freed. So, anyways, um, the point being, though, specifically, is that multiculturalism does not destroy everything if there is a unifier
Right.
within that multicultural system. And that either has to be the government or patriotism in the government or force, which is what the government is, or there's just going to be balkanization, and I think that's more what we're seeing. I think there's, regardless of the multiculturalism in the United States, there's still a lot of people from various ethnic groups and cultures who are still very American, so very American patriotic. This is their homeland, this is their fatherland, the paterland of where that comes from, in Latin, and they love the free government. What I always see is how the government has eroded away from constitutionalism, and that's allowed these crazy far left ideas to sink in, and they've allowed our academies, our media, and whatever other institutions aside from the government, the Democratic Party being the largest political party in the world, they that has happened. That has happened not because of multiculturalism per se, but because we didn't have a unified vision
Yeah, I mean,
of freedom.
social fabric is social fabric.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I have trouble buying into a lot of this. The West is the best motif, because I think in a lot of situations the West has become so disconnected from its heritage that we've lost our sense of social fabric that I think a lot of countries, in the East still have.
Okay, okay, but that is Nietzsche's critique. It's Nietzsche's critique also because of Christianity and the
Mm,
search for the truth, and then Enlightenism, or sorry, the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason and all that. And I think that Nietzsche was not correct. I think that the form of Christianity that permeated the West
mhm.
was, uh, sorry, Catholics, sorry, folks, if you're out there and a Catholic, was Gnosticism. So to know, gnosis, and that is Augustinianism, and that has nothing to do with Christianity. Um, there were sects of Gnostic Christians, don't get me wrong, but that goes back to Augustine and then later on Calvin. But Augustinianism being what the Catholic Church more or less follows, getting away from that ancient tradition, and the church marrying the state. And the
Mhm.
church married the state, took control over the state, and our society basically then rejected the church completely. So we're left with nothing in this void, and and that is where Nietzsche is right, and we filled that with the state.
Well, if,
So, anyways,
we feel it with that, but I think even more so, post 1950, I guess, or post World War II, we filled it with mindless consumption. We filled it with uh, technological doodads that occupy our time. We've got a lot of things that separated us from the way we used to live in terms of
we
our tribes, or however you want to look at it.
Tank, we come back to this a lot, but I don't disagree with you. I know it's heavy on your mind. It's like the idea that so many things can be the factors, right? It's
Yeah.
not. It's never society, humanity, all that. We're very complicated, right? It's a very complicated thing.
Mm.
We're not even here on the stream trying to solve any real issue. We're just talking about it, right?
I'm just talking shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're just two guys like figuring it out, while we're drinking beer, living that high life. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, Miller, if you guys want to sponsor us,
that'd be great.
I mean, I like high life. It's funny where I've come, because when I was young, I used to drink dark beers, lagers, Yingling.
Mm.
I like MGD starting off, then like Yingling, and then I went into the whole like German beer import stuff, and then like the craft brew, or back in my day, they used to be called micro brews,
Oh yeah.
but the whole craft brew thing, and then I went into the IPA thing, mainly because they were cheap and I could get them at the gas station and they were high
Mm.
alcohol. not not saying I'm proud of that, but um, there are some IPAs around here. There's a local brewery that I really like that does a good IPA because it's not overly hopped. They have the right amount of heat to fruitiness to whatever. Um, but anyways, most IPAs are just stupid. Sorry, guys. Like if you got to get into multi beer, whatever. But now, regardless, regardless, now that I'm almost 40, high life,
That's where
champagne
you're at.
beers,
I've been doing that too. I was really
PBR, dude, high life and PBR.
I was really into well, I still am. I go to breweries and stuff, but when I first got into drinking beer, I got into it because I didn't like my dad drank Budweiser when I was growing up, and I really never liked
Right.
it. But I got into like the German beers and the microbreweries and stouts and all these gozas and all this weird stuff. And now I'm just like, man, I just want to sit on the lake and drink a Coors Banquet.
I've never had one of those, but
Oh, it's the
still not a
best.
fan of Coors. Still not a fan of Coors. Like I've been to Golden, Colorado, and there's literally a little bridge right over to the Coors plant. And right on the other side of that little bridge is a liquor store that says the freshest coolers in the United States,
Ooh,
which I'm sure it is because I
ooh.
was actually in Golden on the 4th of July. Golden's a really cool little town, really interesting. But I wouldn't want to live in Colorado because those red states keep flipping blue.
Oh yeah.
What's going on with that, man?
I don't know. That I don't know. When it comes to like a lot of these inter-party politics and between Democrats and Republicans, I guess I'm getting to a point where I'm not as focused on that as I used to be. Like when I was younger, I was coming to age during the Bush years. I kind of give my age away here, but I was like, I didn't really like Bush.
It's
Oh God, and then
35.
and then I became like I don't know if I'd say left wing, but definitely Democrat. And then I cared about I read that book. What was it called? All these anti-Bush books that were coming out at the time.
Oh yeah.
About how stupid he was, and there was that show like That's Not Bush. It was really ridiculous, and I was going
See,
to like,
I haven't been a Democrat since I
yeah,
was like 12, so I don't relate. I have no idea.
yeah, and I was going to Warp Tour, and I
But I
was
haven't been a Republican since I was like
yeah.
26, so I'm pretty good.
But and I cared, but now I like man, like I said, I just want to drink Coors Banquet and live in a country where people don't hate me.
Yeah, and that's that thing where I come from, that live and let live, and
Yeah,
whatever classical liberalism's supposed to be and supposed to mean. To me, it's just maximizing the freedom of the individual. Like it doesn't mean you get to go around and murder people. Like that's just like what? No, no. Well, you can't do this. You can't do. My favorite's lefty stuff where they're like, well, the government says you can't collect rainwater. Well, there's environmental reasons. I'm like, are you an idiot? Like, do you think that someone collecting barrels or having a little hole in the pond, they're like, what about runoff and whatever? And I'm like, do you know how big of a hole in the ground to collect rainwater you would have to stop actual runoff onto another farm or another thing?
yeah,
It always feels like to me that extreme lefties want to go into this thing where they just want to make um excuses for the government to have power, and they're always going to look for something something that justifies what they have to say, and it doesn't matter how ridiculous or stupid it is. And to me, we're not going to talk about it today because I think we need to cut out here soon, but to me, environmentalism is part of that.
right.
It's like, let's bring down the whole electronic grid and everything else and all of our fossil fuels just to save the earth. And it's like, do you know how many people are going to starve to death immediately when that happens?
Yeah, we didn't have a show about environmentalism one day. Because I do kind of consider myself somewhat of an environmentalist, but I come from a very different perspective than a lot of this stuff. So
I think we were supposed to talk about that, but then
something else happened. Yeah. Okay. Well,
So
whatever.
But let's cut out of here, man. I think
Okay.
that's a pretty good show for the night. We cut out a while ago, but hell, the rest of this will be on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I'll post it here in a little bit.
All right, sweet.
All right.
So guys, thank you for listening and watching. Those the few of you that did or will or whatever else. Work in progress. But I do want to say this, right? You all be safe, keep your spirits up, and remember, the ends always justify those memes. Hit that outro, Tank.
I'm talking about all the way to the top, yeah. Unjustifiably in a position that I'd rather not be in, but the cream will rise to the top, oh yeah. Macho Madness, yes, got more to offer than President Jack Tunney thinks that I got. Yeah, I know. Let me tell you something right now. Cards stacked against the Macho Man Randy Savage in WrestleMania 3.